The Caribbean sun was barely rising when the first American aircraft appeared over the island of Grenada. It was October 1983, and down below lay a tropical paradise that had turned into a dangerous powder keg. Palm trees lined the beaches, turquoise water rolled against the shore, and hidden among those hills were armed Marxist forces who had just seized control of the island in a violent coup. And right in the middle of it all were nearly 1,000 American medical students, civilians trapped in chaos with no way out. For the United States, that was unacceptable. When President Ronald Reagan ordered Operation Urgent Fury, he made it clear.
Grenada and a half dozen other Caribbean islands here were, until recently, British colonies. They're now independent states and members of the British Commonwealth.
American citizens would be rescued, the hostile regime would be removed, and the island of Grenada would not be allowed to become a communist foothold in the Caribbean. It wasn't just about a tiny island. This was about stability in the Western Hemisphere, and showing that the United States still had the will to act quickly and decisively. As the invasion force moved into position, the skies filled with the roar of American air power. A-7 Corsairs rolled in low, loaded with precision ordnance. A-18 Hornets stood ready to provide fast, lethal strikes on command. And circling above like silent predators were the AC-130 gunships, the Angel of Death, capable of bringing more firepower than some small nations. Below them, U.S. Army Rangers and Marines prepared to hit the island from multiple directions. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a coordinated, fast-moving air-ground assault that the American military had spent years perfecting. And Grenada was about to see exactly what that looked like. The first indication the enemy had came from the thunder of jet engines screaming over their capital. As the sun broke the horizon, the A-7 Corsairs began their runs, smashing anti-aircraft positions and clearing the way for the transports carrying the Rangers. The defenses were scattered and confused. The Marxist forces on the ground were not expecting the United States to respond this quickly, and certainly not with this much force. The Rangers parachuted in, capturing key positions and pushing toward the medical campus where American students were hiding. But Grenada wasn't a flat island. It was rugged, steep, and covered in dense vegetation. Enemy troops had the high ground, and firefights broke out almost immediately. That's when the AC-130s went to work. With infrared sensors and devastating 105mm guns, the gunships hovered above like floating fortresses, tearing apart enemy strongpoints that threatened the American troops. Every time Marxist fighters used the terrain to their advantage, the gunships stripped that advantage away. Every time U.S. forces took fire from hidden positions, the AC-130s turned those positions into smoking craters. The speed of American coordination was overwhelming. Meanwhile, offshore, ships from the U.S. Navy launched aircraft and helicopters non-stop. The Marines stormed beaches on the opposite side of the island, splitting the enemy force. The FA-18 Hornets, still a relatively new aircraft at the time, proved their worth immediately. They were fast, accurate, and perfectly suited for the quick-react strikes needed in an operation like this. Whenever ground commanders called for help, the Hornets were overhead in minutes, dropping precision ordnance that cleared the way for advancing troops. In those early hours, American students were huddled behind locked doors, listening to gunfire echo through the hills. Many had no idea what was happening. Some didn't even know an invasion had begun. But when U.S. Rangers burst through the campus, weapons ready, the students realized help had arrived. Those young Americans, who had been stuck on an island caught between political chaos and armed Marxist forces, were suddenly surrounded by U.S. soldiers who'd just parachuted into a war zone to pull them out. That rescue alone became a defining image of Operation Urgent Fury. But the battle wasn't over. Enemy forces tried to regroup, setting up roadblocks and ambushes using armored vehicles and heavy weapons provided by Cuba and the Soviet bloc. But even the most determined defense can't stand against coordinated American firepower. The A-7 Corsairs swooped in again, blasting armored vehicles and command centers. The Hornets ran strike after strike, neutralizing pockets of resistance before they could threaten American troops. And late into the night, the AC-130s lit up the island with their fearsome broadside guns, turning enemy positions into silhouettes of flame. Within just a day, American forces had seized key airfields, liberated the students, and cut the enemy's communications. The speed of the operation was staggering. The Marxist regime had spent years building up its defenses. The United States took them apart in hours. By the second day, the enemy was collapsing. Many surrendered. Others fled into the hills. A few made desperate last stands that ended the same way. Precision American strikes guided by near-flawless coordination between pilots, soldiers, and Marines. The most striking part of the operation wasn't just the victory, but the sheer efficiency of it. The world watched in real time as the United States projected massive military power thousands of miles from home, deploying air, sea, and land forces in perfect synchronization. This wasn't a slow build-up. This wasn't a drawn-out conflict. This was rapid response, the kind that reminded every nation on Earth what the U.S. military was capable of when American lives were at stake. Back in Washington, critics questioned the decision to invade a small island. But Americans saw the truth. Nearly 1,000 U.S. students were rescued from a violent Marxist regime, and an entire nation was stabilized in a matter of days. And the veterans watching understood something else. This kind of mission requires guts, skill, and the ability to adapt in an environment that changes by the second. By day 3, major combat operations were effectively over. Grenada's government had collapsed. American forces controlled the island, and the students were safely evacuated, finally free from the uncertainty and fear that had hung over their heads since the coup. U.S. casualties existed, and they mattered deeply. But for an operation launched with such speed across rugged terrain, against an armed Marxist force, the losses were far lower than anyone expected. The United States had delivered a complete, decisive victory in an operation that lasted only days. And what did the world take from it? They saw that the U.S. military could mobilize, deploy, strike, rescue, stabilize, and withdraw, faster than most nations could even organize their forces. They saw that American aircraft, from the rugged A-7 Corsair to the cutting-edge F/A-18 Hornet to the devastating AC-130 gunships, could dominate every inch of the sky and every enemy position on the ground. And they saw that the U.S. Army Rangers and Marines were capable of dropping into an island fortress and dismantling it piece by piece. In the years that followed, Operation Urgent Fury became a template, a demonstration of rapid U.S. power projection. It showed how quickly the United States could respond to threats, protect its citizens, and stop hostile regimes before they could entrench themselves. It proved that American pilots, soldiers, and Marines could coordinate with lethal precision. And perhaps most importantly, it reminded the world that the United States didn't need weeks or months to act. Sometimes all it needed was a few days. For the men who fought there, Grenada became a point of pride. It wasn't the biggest war, it wasn't the longest, but it was clean, it was decisive, and it saved lives, American lives. For many Americans watching the news in 1983, especially those who remembered Vietnam or the long tension of the Cold War, Operation Urgent Fury felt like something they hadn't seen in years. A clear mission, a fast response, and an undeniable victory. It was the kind of operation that reminded people that when the United States chooses to act, it can still bring unmatched power to the battlefield. And for the older Americans in your audience, Drill Sergeant, the men who grew up watching the Cold War unfold, who saw communism spread, who lived through decades of uncertainty, this operation wasn't just a military mission, it was a reassurance. A moment when America stood tall, acted decisively, and proved to the world that American strength had not faded. Operation Urgent Fury lasted only days, but its impact lasted decades. It showed that the United States could strike fast, rescue its people, and topple a hostile regime, all while demonstrating the unmatched coordination of American air and ground forces. When the sun set over Grenada after the final day of fighting, the island was quiet again. The guns had stopped. The students were safe. The enemy was defeated. And the world had been reminded, once again, why the United States military is the most capable fighting force on Earth. If you want the tone more ominous, more patriotic, or expanded to 2,000+ words, just say the word, Drill Sergeant.